LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the February 6th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you like what I'm doing today. I'll be showing you the 13 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which would be a really educational, informative, fair use, media criticism, and political commentary show for you all today. My main topic is ballooning tensions between U.S. and China. I always enjoy a good double entendre, and it's because that was the Sunday morning news analysis shows focused on this big story over the weekend of the Chinese spy balloon shot down after crossing over the U.S. mainland from like Idaho down through South Carolina. And one thing I noticed, and for a possible Fox News bias video I might use, is that the word balloon is not really scary. It's actually kind of silly, and in a minute I'll show you how Fox News tried to make the Chinese balloon seem more scary. But for my first political comedy clip, I want to show you Saturday Night Live's Cold Open from last weekend, making several jokes about the Chinese spy balloon based on the premise that balloons are just silly, not scary. And I'll talk about that with you a little more after we watch that Saturday Night Live Cold Open clip together over here.
I'm Katy, and tonight our long national nightmare is over. We got the balloon. For more details, I'm honored to be joined tonight by Pentagon official and aviation expert, General William Hamilton.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations, General, on your successful mission.
Thank you. We popped the balloon.
General, we've never seen an object like this gain entry into our airspace before. How did that happen?
That's an excellent question, Katy. The balloon was somehow able to get past our West Coast anti-balloon defense system, the Seattle Space Needle. But once it was here, we were able to keep an eye on it with our sophisticated tracking technology of going like this.
Understood.
I know there were questions about why we didn't shoot it down immediately, but we wanted to wait till it was over the coast so that it wouldn't fall on people or go and land on my car.
So yeah, I think that Saturday Night Live in their cold open there made several jokes about how silly balloons are and not scary. And because it's a Chinese spy balloon, which does have some national security implications. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just saying that the word balloon doesn't really scare people unless they're, I don't know, suffering from globophobia, which I believe is fear of balloons. That's something that actually exists. But other than that, people aren't scared of balloons. And so I noticed Fox News today, all of their news anchors and reporters were doing their best to try to make the Chinese spy balloon seem more scary by using other words than balloon to describe it. I don't know how many nouns and pronouns other than balloon can you see on Fox News's America's Newsroom this morning. Bill Hemmer and Dana Perino, the co-hosts, how many nouns and pronouns do they use other than balloon to describe the balloon to try to make it seem more scary over in the 90 seconds in this clip?
So that was an incredible moment, only seen live on this channel from over the weekend. An American F-22 shooting down that Chinese spy craft off the Carolina coast. That airship dead in the water, but the political fallout has just begun, and there's a lot of it. Hope you had a great weekend. It's Monday. I'm Bill Hemmer. Here we go. Nice to see you.
Nice
How
to see
are you, partner?
We've got a good catch-up already.
Yes,
we'll
have.
fill you in as we go along. I'm Dana Perino. This is America's Newsroom. Pretty remarkable over the weekend. President Biden's decision to shoot down the spy flight drawing a heated response from China, Beijing calling it an obvious overreaction, while threatening to retaliate. Well, China insists this was a machine being used just to track the weather. The Pentagon says that is simply not true.
So here is what we think we know. The unmanned aircraft came from mainland China. The U.S. first detected it on January 28th over Alaska. It then made its way through Canada, crossing into northern Idaho on the 31st. That's when the White House says the president was first briefed on it and gave the order to shoot it down when safe to do so.
Officials advised the president to wait until the aircraft was over water. They allowed it to leisurely float across the country, raising fears it could be gathering sensitive intelligence. However, the Pentagon says it blocked the spy flight from doing that. And 4 days later, the Air Force took the shot.
So the Navy and the Coast Guard now in the process of trying to recover that debris. They're hoping to reverse engineer it and glean some intel from what is left behind. But according to Republicans, the damage has already been done.
And I'll have a couple clips of Marco Rubio that they were one of the clips they showed there, but I think that was like between 10 and 15 if you count the nouns and the pronouns. They used like 15 nouns and pronouns to substitute for the word balloon in that story, so they never had to say the word balloon. And I saw this pattern repeated like all day on Fox News. And like the most amusing part that came up, and what this means to me, by the way, is that like someone sent a memo that, you know, Fox News is famous for their like messaging memos, because of course, if you've read the book over here by Gabriel Sherman, The Loudest Voice in the Room, you know, Fox News was created not to be a journalistic news outlet, but to be a propaganda arm of the Republican Party, which in fact it turned out to be. And so there's a big history of like these memos coming down from management of like the messaging of the day, how we're supposed to message. And I think, you know, they're talking about reverse engineering from the balloon to like figure out what it was doing. You can kind of reverse engineer from the way the reporters and anchors are talking about the balloon without saying the word balloon, that there was some kind of memo sent out that we're not supposed to say the word balloon. And one of the things I kind of found amusing later in the day was apparently Neil Cavuto from Cavuto Live, he didn't read the memo. And so he like tossed the story over to their reporter, Aishah Hasnie, and she like got flustered and couldn't remember what word she was supposed to say instead of balloon. Or anyway, that's how I interpret this additional Fox News bias clip from today that I'll talk about a little more after we watch it together over here.
Well, Aishah Hasnie at Capitol Hill with how this China balloon incident seems to have united both parties. Aishah.
Right, both Democrats and Republicans are coming together to try to figure out how this balloon or object really was able to cross into the U.S. airspace. We're going to tell you what Democrats are calling for right after this break.
And you see Chinese spy flight path. It's not Chinese spy balloon. They talk about it as a flight, an aircraft, a machine. Well, you saw all the words they use there. So I don't know. You can let me know what you think about the Fox News bias I just showed you in those last two clips. Do you think that they tried to avoid saying the word balloon because it was too silly? And, you know, why is it that Republicans are so scared of this balloon? You can let me know what you think in the comment section, or I don't know, that all might make a good Fox News bias video that I could edit out of the beginning of this longer live stream, kind of like I did with that Chuck Todd video on last week's. I don't know, you can let me know what you think about that too in the comment section. I kind of set it up to do that. So now I'm going to go into the way the different Sunday news analysis shows covered this story. And one thing to keep in mind is there was this really weird, like off-the-record briefing at the Pentagon on Saturday before all these Sunday news programs. And I call it weird because, you know, usually off-the-record Defense Department briefings where, you know, you can attribute it to a senior Defense Department official or senior military official or whatever. Those are like totally off the record and there's no transcript of it. But for some reason, the Defense Department put the transcript up of their off the record briefing on February 4th, Saturday. You can see I took a little excerpt of it, but I put a link down in the video description where you can see the whole like senior defense official and senior military official hold an off-camera, on-background press briefing update on the high-altitude surveillance balloon. And one of the things they said in that briefing that I've highlighted here is that these balloons have transited the continental United States, and remember that part, continental United States, briefly at least 3 times during the prior administration, that means the Trump administration, and once that we know of at the beginning of this administration, but never for this duration of time. And that's important because you're going to see like all these Republicans reacting negatively to Biden's response to this balloon with, and I'm going to show you, after I show you the news summaries, which cover that to varying degrees, I'm going to show you the newsmaker clips of how Republicans were cross-examined on that fact, from like not very well to, I mean, none of them were cross-examined that well on it, although this is kind of a developing story, and there's been some additional word from the Pentagon that what that means is that there were like a few flights over Texas and Florida, but the Trump administration didn't even know about it. It wasn't even found out till during the Biden administration that this had happened during the Trump administration. But I'll talk about that more when I get to the Tom Cotton clip coming up after the news summaries. But first I want to show you all 5 of the news summaries pretty much covering this same story, starting with the longest and probably the best one from NBC News' Meet the Press. Chuck Todd, I think, explained it. I mean, he spends almost 4 minutes on it, but it's worth watching, and I'll talk about it with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good Sunday morning. A Chinese spy balloon has set off a diplomatic crisis, deepening mistrust between the United States and China and triggering political finger-pointing here at home before being shot down on Saturday. The U.S. military first detected the balloon over Alaska's Aleutian Islands last Saturday. It was spotted by civilians on Wednesday over Billings, Montana. Montana, by the way, is also home to Malmstrom Air Force Base, which houses 150 intercontinental ballistic missile silos. There were sightings of this balloon over Missouri and Kansas on Friday, and of course over the Carolinas on Saturday. The FAA had to close airspace and pause flights at 3 airports in order to allow the F-22 fighter jet to shoot down this balloon 6 miles off the Carolina coast with a single air-to-air missile. The dramatic takedown at 2:39 p.m. Saturday was caught on camera. China's foreign ministry declared its strong discontent and protest, calling it an overreaction, saying it retains the right to respond further. China had claimed the balloon was simply a civilian airship that was being used mainly for weather observation. But the administration responded that the surveillance balloon was used by China to monitor sensitive military sites and that it also contained surveillance equipment. On Friday, the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, had to cancel his first official visit to China. He was set to arrive in Beijing last night.
The presence of this surveillance balloon over the United States in our skies is a clear violation of our sovereignty, a clear violation of international law, and clearly unacceptable. I can only imagine what the reaction would be in China if they were on the other end.
Now, before the balloon was taken down Saturday, Republicans on Capitol Hill were lashing out at President Biden for not acting sooner.
I don't think the Chinese Communist Party would hesitate to shoot down an American asset that was in their airspace.
This administration is keeping us in the dark and then claiming that they're doing what they're supposed to do.
They could have shot that balloon down, and the biggest risk might have been hitting a cow, a prairie dog, or an antelope.
After the balloon was shot down, Republicans praised the military for taking it down, but criticized President Biden for waiting too long. The back and forth over the spy balloon is just the latest escalation of U.S.-China tensions, as China has been trying to rehabilitate its global image post-COVID. Just in the last 2 weeks, an American general sent a memo predicting the U.S. will be at war with China in 2 years over Taiwan. And the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was in the Philippines on Thursday to announce a new military buildup and new uses of bases there by our military. China has tried to play both sides of Russia's assault on Ukraine, saying it is opposed to the war, but has been shipping Russia some military technology despite sanctions and despite denials that they're doing it. Meanwhile, Biden has doubled down on the Trump administration's policy of having a more aggressive competition economically with China. All of this an acknowledgement that the decades that multiple presidential administrations bet on, that economic engagement with China would somehow push the country into democratic reforms, has been a complete failure. The president addressed the takedown of the balloon on his way to Camp David Saturday.
On Wednesday, when I was briefed on the balloon, I ordered the Pentagon to shoot it down on Wednesday as soon as possible. They decided, without doing damage to anyone on the ground, they decided that the best time to do that was as it got over water outside within the 12-mile limit. They successfully took it down, and I want to compliment our aviators who did it.
Joining me now is the Republican chair of the House Intel Committee, Mike Turner of Ohio.
And I will have a clip. Oh, excuse me. I will have a clip of Representative Mike Turner criticizing Joe Biden for waiting too long to shoot down the Chinese balloon, and Chuck Todd sort of cross-examining him, but not doing a very good job. Not as bad a job as Shannon Bream, and kind of as bad a job as Margaret Brennan. And then, like, the two good cross-examinations are maybe the one from Jonathan Karl on ABC and Jake Tapper on CNN, and I will juxtapose all five of those cross-examinations kind of on this topic of how Republicans are criticizing Biden for shooting down a balloon when Trump had like 3 Chinese spy balloons that apparently he never even knew about, or I don't know exactly how that's going to pan out, the final facts on that, but that's the way it seems to be going. Like, the Trump administration didn't even know about these prior Chinese balloons. And anyway, but that was the NBC News Meet the Press news summary. I thought it was good because it really added additional context about the new military bases in the Philippines and other tensions with China that are going on right now. Oh, the U.S. general whose comments were leaked, or I don't know, maybe like purposely leaked to the press, that he thinks the U.S. might be at war with China by 2025 over Taiwan. That was all in the NBC News Meet the Press news summary, and not in these other ones you're going to see. The Fox News Sunday one, actually, it's like more journalistic. Lucas Tomlinson actually reports on what was in that Defense Department briefing I showed you. Well, it's because Jennifer Griffin, the Fox News reporter, if you go click on the link to this off-the-record briefing that apparently they have a transcript available for, you'll see that the Fox News reporter was there, Jennifer Griffin, which may be why Lucas Tomlinson actually reports that during the Trump administration, Chinese spy balloons did impinge on U.S. territory. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch the Fox News Sunday news summary together.
Hello from Fox News in Washington. The president is just 2 days away from his State of the Union address. It's a critical moment as he sets an agenda for the second half of his term, and it's an opening salvo against challengers as he prepares for a likely run for re-election. And take a look at this moment. As the U.S. took out a Chinese surveillance balloon, it's the end of a strange incident, but it's only the beginning of diplomatic turbulence between 2 superpowers. U.S. officials saying its presence over the U.S. was, quote, intentional. We'll get to both those stories and more this morning. In a moment, we will speak live with Arkansas Republican Tom Cotton, who is a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. But first, let's turn to Lucas Tomlinson live at the White House with reaction from Chinese leaders this morning. Hello, Lucas.
Shannon, China calls the shoot down of its balloon an overreaction and says it, quote, reserves the right to make further responses if necessary. President Biden said he gave the order to shoot it down on Wednesday when it was safe to do so.
They decided that the best time to do that was as it got over water.
Fox News exclusive video shows the moment an F-22 Raptor out of Langley Air Force Base destroyed the balloon with a Sidewinder heat-seeking missile at 2:39 p.m. Saturday, 6 miles off the coast of South Carolina in U.S. territorial waters. Pentagon officials say the debris field is 7 miles long in 47 feet of water. U.S. Navy salvage teams will search for the wreckage. Many Republicans asking what took so long. Senator Ted Cruz tweeting, "Absolutely the right thing to do, but Biden should have done it before the Chinese spy balloon went across the entire country." U.S. officials tell Fox it's not the first time Chinese spy balloons have flown over the United States. About 4 months ago, a Chinese spy balloon crashed in the Pacific near Hawaii. Others were spotted over Texas and Florida, dating back to the Trump administration, but never previously acknowledged publicly. The balloon's week-long odyssey overshadowing State of the Union plans.
Today, I'm happy to report that the State of the Union and the state of our economy is strong.
This weekend, the president heading to Camp David for final preps. The president likely to tout the 517,000 new jobs added in January, as well as spending on infrastructure and green technology. Biden's State of the Union address, a likely test run for his stump speech if he decides to run for re-election, which is expected. A new Fox News poll shows more Americans fear a coming recession, and 55% of Democrats say they're dissatisfied with the direction of the country. Shannon?
Yeah, we'll dig into those polls. Lucas Tomlinson reporting from the White House. Lucas, thank you very much. Joining me now, Senator Tom Cotton, who's
And I will have a Senator Tom Cotton clip coming up right after the news summaries, and in it, I don't think Shannon Bream does a really journalistic job of doing what Lucas Tomlinson, that's one of the things I say about Fox News is like every now and then, coincidentally, journalism does occur, and you saw Lucas Tomlinson reporting on what the Pentagon said in that briefing where Jennifer Griffin was, that that balloons had traversed the country during the previous administration 3 times. And it says the previous administration, not previous administrations, because when I get to that Tom Cotton clip, you'll see he tries to claim, it must have been the Obama administration, which is totally bogus. But I want to get to the rest of the news summaries before I get to that Tom Cotton clip. The next one is the one thing it shares in terms of bias with the Fox News Sunday news summary you just saw is at the very end they talked about bad polls for Biden. And for some reason, polling is always like when there are polls that are bad for Biden, it's always news on Fox News. And then all the other news programs, if they have like a new poll that's like breaking news, that's really important, even though one of the things we learned in the midterms is polls aren't really that accurate and maybe they shouldn't be such big news. But that's ABC News This Week with George Stephanopoulos with their host this week, Jonathan Karl. Mostly reports on the Chinese spy balloon that got shot down after going across the U.S. mainland, but also talks about this ABC poll, which I guess was like supposed to be their news for the State of the Union coming up later this week. But anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary together.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. With the State of the Union address just 2 days away, we have a new poll showing the steep challenges facing President Biden and some alarming numbers for Democrats about the prospects of a Biden-Trump rematch. But we begin this morning with the Chinese spy balloon shot down yesterday. The balloon first entered American airspace over Alaska 10 days ago, before crossing into Canada and then re-entering American airspace in Montana on Tuesday, spending the rest of the week floating across the mainland of the United States at an altitude of about 60,000 feet. The Chinese insisted it was just a weather balloon that had veered off course. The Pentagon says it was a sophisticated, high-altitude surveillance system sent by the Chinese to spy on the U.S. The balloon's path went above the U.S. nuclear silos and other sensitive sites, sparking a major diplomatic clash between the United States and China and prompting Secretary of State Blinken to cancel a highly anticipated visit this week to Beijing. And late yesterday, an Air Force F-22 fighter jet fired a single air-to-air missile into the balloon, bringing it down into the waters off the coast of South Carolina, where there is now an ongoing effort to retrieve the surveillance equipment it was carrying. There are a lot of unanswered questions this morning about what the Chinese were trying to do and about a second Chinese balloon spotted yesterday over South America and what this means for U.S.-China relations. Former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, is here to help us sort it out.
And I won't show you that clip from Admiral Mike Mullen. If you want to see the whole ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos program, down in the video description under sources, I put links to the sources of all my videos, including all 5 of the Big 5 corporate outlet programs. I mean, that was an okay news summary, except for the, just like Fox News, focusing on their poll for some reason. And then I'm going to round out the news summaries with the last 2, CNN State of the Union and CBS News' Face the Nation, both a little over 90 seconds, around the same length as the ABC one. They're both okay. I'll talk about them both after we watch them. Here's CNN State of the Union. Jake Tapper talking about how, I guess, the state of our union, what, you know, every week he says, what is the state of the union? Well, this week, I guess, because we shot down the Chinese spy balloon and we're deflated, I guess, over in the...
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is deflated. The U.S. military is recovering the remnants of a 90-foot-long suspected Chinese spy balloon that was shot down just off the South Carolina coast on Saturday after an F-22 Raptor's A-9X missile popped the balloon after its week-long mission gathering intelligence over the United States and Canada. Defense Secretary Austin said yesterday that President Biden on Wednesday ordered that the balloon be taken down as soon as safely possible, and that to avoid any risk to Americans, the Pentagon waited until the balloon drifted just off U.S. soil to act, underlining the embarrassment of this all for President Biden. On the eve of the State of the Union address, a senior administration official acknowledged that the U.S. believes the Chinese government was able to maneuver the balloon and was using it to try and monitor sensitive sites across the country. The Chinese government is responding to the downing of their balloon with, quote, strong dissatisfaction and protest, unquote, accusing the U.S. of overreacting to what they claim was a civilian aircraft that veered off course by accident, and warning they reserve the right to, quote, make further necessary reaction, unquote. But the Pentagon said a similar spy balloon had been spotted flying over Latin America. This incident prompted Secretary of State Antony Blinken to cancel a long-planned visit to China this weekend, unraveling months of cautious outreach and pushing the two nations closer towards a collision. And joining me now is the Secretary of the Department of Transportation.
And there are a couple interviews with Pete Buttigieg. I'm not showing any of those clips because I'm going to show you all the cross-examinations of the Republicans. But first, let me round out the news summaries with the shortest of the news summaries, covering the same material, just more quickly, I guess, on CBS News' Face the Nation. Margaret Brennan, before she turns it over to their defense expert, David Martin, and I won't show that, but here is the beginning of Face the Nation from yesterday.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. Well, it was a drama that had all the signs of a Hollywood movie. The end of the Chinese spy balloon's journey was somewhat predictable, but what happens next is still very much up in the air. According to the White House, the balloon was detected a week ago in Alaskan airspace and was not assessed to be an intel risk or threat. It then drifted through Canadian airspace, moving southeast, and was spotted in Montana, home to a U.S. nuclear missile base, where it turned into a very public diplomatic crisis. Beijing insisted the balloon was an airship gathering weather data that had just drifted off course. Secretary of State Blinken abruptly canceled his trip to China, a visit intended to thaw icy relations between the two countries. Many lawmakers, mostly Republicans, expressed frustration with the administration for not taking action earlier. But the president stuck with the Pentagon's recommendation to wait until the balloon moved offshore and away from civilians, still within U.S. waters. Now, the debris from that balloon, as well as what the Chinese learned from the mission, is of huge interest. The Chinese government issued a scathing reaction to the shoot-down, stating they strongly disapprove and that it was a clear overreaction and a serious violation of international practice, and warned that Beijing reserves the right to make further responses. We want to bring in our David Martin for more on.
And if you want to see the rest of that CBS News Face the Nation clip, down under sources in the video description, if you click on the Face the Nation link, it actually goes to their YouTube channel where their whole program is split into clips, including the analysis from their defense expert, David Martin. But I don't know which of those news summaries you think was the best. I thought NBC News Meet the Press was, but you kind of saw them all together. You can let me know what you think in the comment section. And now I'm going to get to the newsmaker clips. And first, the Senator Tom Cotton clip I promised, where Shannon Bream doesn't really cross-examine him on his assertions about what he learned from unnamed Trump administration officials, and doesn't really follow up on what the Defense Department told Fox News' own reporter Jennifer Griffin in that off-the-record briefing that I showed you the transcript from, and lets Tom Cotton get away with this weird assertion that it's really Obama's fault, which I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Okay, so you're on the Senate Intel Committee. Maybe you can help us out a little bit more with this timeline. General Keane, familiar to our viewers, says it's his belief that we knew about this when it left mainland China. We would have a way to track it over the Pacific. He's questioning why we didn't take it out then. Here's what Bloomberg said about why we didn't know more about it after it entered U.S. airspace January 28th. It says, with such a high-profile trip at stake, meaning the Secretary of State going, keeping it on the down low was key. The White House opted not to inform the American public. Events, however, soon forced Biden's hand. As Lucas has reported, and folks I've talked to in the Pentagon as well say, there are these balloons that have gone over before. So at what point do you have to tell the American public or not?
Well, Shannon, what began as a spy balloon has become a trial balloon, testing President Biden's strength and resolve, and unfortunately, the president failed that test, and that's dangerous for the American people. The president was paralyzed for an entire week by a balloon. We should have shot this balloon down over the Aleutian Islands. We should never have allowed it to transit the entire continental United States. And I think there's a lot of open questions that the administration needs to answer to Congress on behalf of the American people about why they didn't. I think part of it is the president's reluctance to take any action that would be viewed as provocative or confrontational towards the Chinese communists. I would say what's provocative and confrontational is sending a spy balloon all across America. But second, I do believe the administration wanted to salvage the Secretary of State's trip on Friday night, and they got through Thursday afternoon. Thankfully, civilians in Montana and the Billings Gazette identified this balloon and blew the whistle on it, and finally the administration fessed up to the American people. It took another 12 hours for the Secretary of State canceled what was already an ill-advised trip. So I think there's a lot of answers for the administration to provide the American people.
So let me ask you about that, because you called immediately for the trip to be canceled. So former Vice President Mike Pence had a different take. He did agree with you, shoot down the Chinese balloon, but he said, go ahead and send the Secretary of State to China next week, have Secretary Blinken look them in the eye and tell them it better never happen again. That's peace through strength. So why not have Blinken go and have this confrontation face to face?
Well, if the president had chosen to shoot down the balloon when he should have over the Aleutians as soon as it entered our airspace, that might have been worth considering.
Why do you think we didn't?
Again, I think President Biden was hoping not to have to take any confrontational action towards the Chinese communist. He wants to continue to develop what he called the momentum from his meeting with Xi Jinping in Bali last November, even though China has never taken any steps to try to bring down the temperature. And as I write in Only the Strong, in many cases throughout history, Democratic presidents only take action like shooting down this balloon once their hand is forced. And I think on Thursday, when civilians in Montana identified this balloon, it really forced the president's hand. I think it's an open question that if this had not become public, if the administration had not briefed this matter to Congress Thursday afternoon after it was about to become public, whether the president would have even shot down the balloon once it got over the Atlantic Ocean.
Well, what about this contention that these balloons have gone over the U.S. or some portion of the U.S. under previous administrations and they didn't shoot it down that we know of?
So I've spoken to a lot of former Trump administration officials. They say they're not aware of anything like this happening during their administration. It's possible maybe that it happened first during the Obama administration and the military was told at the time that this is no big deal and they shouldn't raise the alarm bells on it. We need to get answers to that as well, though. I think some may be conflating what Lucas just reported, balloons floating within the 12-mile exclusionary zones of places like Hawaii or Guam, and a spy balloon going all across the middle of the country. Those are two very different circumstances. Maybe what's even more worrisome is, one, did our senior military know about these balloons in the past and not inform their civilian superiors during the Trump administration? Or maybe worst of all, did we not know about these balloons in the past and we only learned about them in retrospect by studying historical data? Again, these are all open questions for which the American people deserve answers, and we in Congress are going to get those answers.
Okay, so you heard the Chinese government's reaction. They say they reserve the right to make further responses if necessary. And last week, sitting right where you are, the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee said he agreed with, he hoped it wasn't true, but a general who'd spoken up and said to his troops, I think we could be in conflict with China, actual war by 2025. So where do you put?
So I wanted to keep that clip playing until you saw there Shannon Bream mentioned that news story that was included in the NBC News Meet the Press news summary about the American general who, like, his comments were leaked or maybe purposely leaked, that we're worried that there might be conflict with China by 2025 over Taiwan. But other than that, that was not a very great cross-examination. You saw Tom Cotton got away with blaming Obama for, like, talking about how saying he had talked to all these former Trump administration officials. Shannon Bream never followed up on, well, who said that? Who said that? Although he may have, like, kind of stumbled into the truth at the end there, where the way the story's been developing, it looks like there were Chinese spy balloons that crossed into the territory of the United States, or, you know, at least our 12-mile territorial limit, or maybe even over Texas and Florida, the mainland, or at least the coastline, during the Trump administration, but they never even knew about it then. It was just found out during the Biden administration through some sort of, like, retrospective analysis, which was what Tom Cotton was saying there. So I don't know exactly what he knows or why he has that information or that speculation, but that I think may actually turn out to be what happened, that there were Chinese balloons during the Trump administration, not the Obama administration, but they weren't detected then. But then at the beginning of the Biden administration, they detected one, and then they went back and found out there had been previous ones in Florida and Texas. That's the briefly over the continental United States. But anyway, we'll see where that story goes. Apparently, there are going to be hearings on this, but otherwise, you know, not great cross-examination from Shannon Bream. And the next two cross-examinations from actual journalists on NBC News's Meet the Press and CBS News's Face the Nation, also not all that great. The next one, Chuck Todd on NBC News's Meet the Press, you'll see Mike Turner gets the idea that Chuck Todd is like a sympathetic witness. At one point, he says, you know, the Defense Department, well, he talks about how the Defense Department says there were previous balloons under the Trump administration, which Mike Turner doesn't even really respond to very well. And then at one point, Chuck Todd cross-examines him, sort of. The Defense Department saying that they were able to jam the information going back to China and they stopped the intelligence gathering. Do you buy that? And Mike Turner says, no, I don't buy that. And you don't either. And Chuck Todd says nothing. But he starts off with, like, a softball question. You know, Mike Turner knows a lot about intelligence. So, you know, what have you learned? What have you learned? Let us know what you know about the Chinese balloon. And overall, Chuck Todd does not do a good cross-examination this week again. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
All right, let me start with what you know here. So the decision to take this down, what more have you learned? And you're part of the so-called Gang of Eight. I don't think you guys have gotten a personal briefing, but I know staff has. What more can you tell us about the takedown operation?
Yeah, well, you know, clearly the president taking it down over the Atlantic is sort of like the quarterback, sort of like tackling the quarterback after the game is over. The satellite had completed its mission. This should never have been allowed to enter the United States, and it never should have been allowed to complete its mission. If you ask somebody to draw an X at every place where our sensitive missile defense sites, our nuclear weapons infrastructure, our nuclear weapons sites are, you would put them all along this path. Clearly, this was an attempt by China to gather information to defeat our command and control of our sensitive missile defense and nuclear weapon sites, and that certainly is an urgency that this administration does not recognize.
Do you think we should have a policy that just anything that enters our airspace that's a balloon from China gets shot down immediately?
Well, first off, you have to understand this administration didn't just fail here. They failed to prepare after the first time this happened during this administration. The administration's already admitted, which I've been briefed on, that China has done this before in the continental United States during this president's tenure.
When did that happen?
You have to let them release it. I can't release classified information, but they can tell you.
We also briefed on that there was apparently 2 or 3 incidents in the previous administration as well.
Well, that's what they're saying now, but I think that the administration needs to come forward, because this is not an ability to say that this is a crisis that was handed to them. This is a crisis that has developed as a result of this president during his administration, allowing China to do a similar act before, not responding, and then clearly in this one not seeing the urgency of what was unfolding. I mean, the president allowed this to go across our most sensitive sites and wasn't even going to tell the American public. If you hadn't broken this story, the American public would not have even known. There was no attempt to notify Congress, no attempt to put together the Gang of 8. I think this administration lacks urgency.
The Pentagon says that they were able to use some countermeasures that blocked or limited the ability of China to extract information from this balloon. Do you buy that?
No, and I mean, certainly you don't either. Here's the thing that's interesting. The administration says there was nothing for them to gain here. This was quite a risk by China, quite a calculation that they would take a balloon, put it up in China, take it across the United States where it's clearly going to be discoverable by us. They clearly had some information that they were trying to garner that they can't garner from space, or they did not have otherwise.
I mean, you're pretty familiar with this. What is it that they think they could have gotten from a balloon, or what can be done with a balloon that can't be done with a satellite?
Well, the key obviously is not just the balloon. The key is the payload that was attached to it, which you've reported is the size of 3 buses. That's obviously huge, and it was being commanded and controlled by mainland China and delivering data and information back to mainland China. Again, if you look at the path and you put X's where all of our sensitive missile defense and nuclear weapons facilities are, I believe that they were trying to gain information on how to defeat the command and control of our nuclear weapons systems and our missile defense systems. That's a crisis. That certainly should have had an urgency to the president and not just wait until this gets to the Atlantic to take it down.
Do you at all accept, and it sounds like he did put the order in on Wednesday to shoot it down, and that it's the military that said, hey, it's not safe yet. Do you accept that?
Yeah, no, there's no excuses here. When this first occurred last time during this administration, remember, this is the 3rd year of this administration. They should have been preparing for this. They knew what this was. They know what the balloon is, what its capabilities, maneuverability is, from having observed previous actions by China. They should have been prepared. They seem not only to be unprepared, but to even be waiting. So where is the balloon going to go? What are they trying to do? That's not how you look at the actions of an adversary. China is a self-declared adversary. They are clearly expanding their military capabilities. They're tripling their nuclear weapons capabilities. They're fielding hypersonic weapons. Right. They're expanding in space. In this instance, this president should have taken this as an urgency, and so should have our military. This should have been taken down before it entered U.S. airspace when it was over Alaska.
There's some sort of surveillance technology with this balloon. There's been some speculation that it might have the capability of launching its own drones, sort of miniature drones to do extra surveillance. Do you know anything about that?
And no, he didn't really know anything about that. He didn't know anything about a lot of things. I noticed he said at the end there that to the question that Chuck Todd asked him about, did he disagree with the military waiting to shoot it down till it got over the Atlantic? And he said they should have shot it down over the Aleutian Islands. And I saw in the live comments along the way while we were watching the clips together, Tom Trask here saying, we should have shot it down over the Aleutians. Well, that's not really any more than the incursion over Texas or Florida that you thought we didn't need to shoot down. That's the thing. That the people who are saying the military did the right thing during the Trump administration, or I guess maybe they didn't even detect them during the Trump administration, but where they were, what this actually reminds me of, and what Tom Trask's comment reminded me of, is a video I made right before, like about a year ago, right before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, where the Republicans were like beating on Biden for saying, well, if they just like do a little bit, if like Russian troops just go right over into like a few places where they're already disputed or whatever, that might be a minor incursion. Remember, like the Republicans spent a whole week bagging on President Joe Biden for saying that he might not respond to a minor incursion. And then that's the whole talking point on this Chinese spy balloon from a lot of Republicans is, you know, the big difference between what happened this time and previous Chinese spy balloons is those were just minor incursions, and this was like a big deal, and that's not really a good argument. And so I appreciate Tom Trask in the live comments for bringing that up, and and the thing about the Aleutian Islands thing, or the suggestion that it should have been shot down over the Aleutian Islands. Apparently, it was only in U.S. international waters and airspace in the Aleutian Islands for a matter of minutes. And apparently there wasn't time to actually get the jets out there and shoot it down. And it's illegal to shoot down a Chinese balloon of, spy balloon, weather balloon, whatever it is, over international waters. In international waters, it would be illegal for the U.S. to do that. I mean, maybe you think the U.S. should violate international law or whatever in order to stop this from happening. And then once it came back over land, in Alaska, Canada, whatever, and then through Idaho, it actually did represent some threat to people on the ground. There's like a 7-mile debris field, and when it's starting at 60,000 feet or 65,000 feet, whatever, you can't really predict where it's going to land. And if it's going to land in an area that spans 7 miles, 3 buses, several tons of equipment, people could die, and you have to balance that threat against whatever threat the balloon posed. And I mean, none of us really know. It's really the U.S. military who knows. And I mean, I'm not someone who likes to really take information given out by the U.S. military as gospel, but I'm certainly not going to accept these Republican talking points based on nothing as a rebuttal to them either. So anyway, you can let me know what you think down in the comment section about that. And I have one more bad cross-examination. This is Senator Ted Cruz using a lot of the same Republican talking points, and Margaret Brennan just does a really bad job this week. Most of the time she's just saying like yes and like tell me more, yes, tell me more. I mean, at one point, she kind of mentions the military briefing that said this happened also during the Trump administration. But anyway, not very well. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch the Ted Cruz 3-minute clip together from CBS News' Face the Nation together.
So this balloon traversed 11 states, but the Pentagon says they were able to mitigate some of its impact. Do you think there is a upside to the fact that this was captured this time?
Well, listen, I want to start by doing something that I don't do very often, which is commending Joe Biden for actually having the guts to shoot this down. That was the right thing to do. That is absolutely what the president should have done. Unfortunately, he didn't do that until a week after it entered U.S. airspace. He allowed a full week for the Chinese to conduct spying operations over the United States, over sensitive military installations, exposing not just photographs, but the potential of intercepted communications. And more broadly, I think this entire episode telegraphed weakness to Xi and the Chinese government. And to illustrate why, I would just ask one hypothetical question. Imagine how this would have played out if nobody had taken any pictures of the balloon, if nobody in Montana had looked up and noticed this giant balloon, if it wasn't in the news. We know that when the Biden administration knew about the balloon, they said nothing, they did nothing, they didn't shoot it down. And at the end of the day, I think the only reason they shot it down is because it made it into the news, and they felt forced to as a matter of politics rather than national security. That's a bad message for the Chinese government to hear.
Well, the Pentagon has since disclosed that it's apparently happened 4 times before, never quite like this. Back in 2020, Trump administration shuttered the Chinese consulate in Houston after detecting espionage. Do you think there needs to be more diplomatic fallout on that scale now?
Look, I think there does. When the Trump administration shut the Chinese consulate in Houston, I spoke with the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, about it. And what they had discovered about the espionage activities being carried out in the state of Texas by the Chinese government was horrifying. Right now, there is a Texan, Mark Swedan, who is a political prisoner. He is a hostage in China. He's been there for 10 years. This past week, I introduced a resolution on the floor of the Senate, along with John Cornyn, calling on China to release Mark Swedan. He's wrongfully imprisoned. He's been there 10 years. They've sentenced him to death on charges for which they have little to no evidence. And I had been urging Tony Blinken, when he was going to Beijing, to raise Mark Swedan's case and to make the case for Mark to be released. China, if they want to demonstrate that they're not bad actors, if they want to demonstrate that they can aspire to being a great nation, they should release Mark Swedan, because great nations and great powers don't hold political prisoners.
And he is wrongfully detained, according to the State Department. This was raised to Xi Jinping in November, and there hasn't been a release to date. Thank you for mentioning that. But I want to ask you about your role. You are the top Republican on the Senate Commerce Committee. You're also a dad. I know you know how hard it is to keep kids offline in this app called TikTok.
And then that's the only follow-up is on TikTok. And did you see there how Margaret Brennan did basically no cross-examination of Senator Ted Cruz, just basically saying yes, yes, and I agree, and yes. And there was, even on the whole topic of what happened during the Trump administration with the previous balloons that were infringing on the territory of the United States. And that's as much as we knew during the Sunday morning news analysis shows that did not come up in the cross-examinations. And I also forgot to mention before I showed that clip, Ted Cruz he's like an old debater. He's an advocate. He advocated in the Supreme Court for the state of Texas for years, and he went to Harvard Law School, and he's like such a lawyer and a debater that but he used like one of the oldest tricks in the book there, where he like started off his argument by saying, I'm going to say something nice about my opponent. I'm going to commend Biden for having the guts to shoot it down. And then, of course, there's a but, because, with Ted Cruz, there's always a but, if you know what I mean. I mean, we know who the but is in this story, but then it's like, I'm going to commend him, but it turns out, big switcheroo, I'm really insulting Joe Biden for, he had the guts, but then he did it way too late and whatever. That's the debater's trick to like get people's attention, because it sounds like you're conceding a point, and that's something you never do when you're a debater. I'm going to concede the point, but switcheroo, I'm actually going to win the point. That's a big surprise there from Ted Cruz. And then finally here, I have two final newsmaker clips on two different methods of cross-examining Senator Marco Rubio on this same issue of, did the Trump administration let Chinese spy balloons go by, but now you're criticizing Biden for letting Chinese spy balloons go by? And I think it's, well, I don't know if Jake Tapper or Jonathan Karl, Jake Tapper on CNN or Jonathan Karl on ABC do a better job Jake Tapper like brings it up and lets Marco Rubio respond, and he kind of gives an explanation that seems to mitigate his hypocrisy or whatever. Jonathan Karl just brings it up at the end and doesn't let him respond. So which one's more effective? Well, let's watch them both and discuss it after we watch them both. Here's CNN's State of the Union. Jake Tapper lets Marco Rubio respond, and he makes some points that kind of mitigates the hypocrisy that I'll talk about a little more after we watch it together.
Can't stop us.
What information do you think the spy balloon might have gleaned as it traveled? I know it was over the fears that it was over some U.S. military installations. I'm also wondering if infrastructure was probably part of the surveillance task it had.
Well, again, it would be speculation other than to tell you that those things usually at that altitude and what they're doing is probably trying to collect on signals, on electronic information that's transiting that they can pick up on. There are various other means that they can do that as well. And that's why I go back to the whole point of the message. There are probably other ways that China could acquire whatever they acquired using this balloon. I may be wrong. There may be some unique attributes to it that I'm not aware of yet, but we'll learn more about this week. But I think more than anything else, beyond just the ability to collect information, it is the ability to send a clear message, and that is that we have the ability to do this, and America can't do anything about it. If they're not going to be able to stop a balloon from flying over U.S. airspace, how is America going to come to your aid if we invade Taiwan or take land from India or take islands from the Philippines and Japan? And I think the fact that they would do that leading up to State of the Union, leading up to what was then Blinken's scheduled visit, none of that is a coincidence. And we need to understand clearly there was messaging behind this.
But so you think that, first of all, I guess there are two parts to a question I have following up on that. One is the Pentagon says that they know of the Chinese doing this at least 4 other times previously, once at the beginning of the Biden administration, 3 times during the Trump administration. It seems to be you're saying no, that's not true. But in any case,
no, I
what's
know
the
what
difference?
I'm saying. Okay, well, the difference is this. Are we aware? Have we seen the Chinese fly these balloons in the past? Yes. I think there's even Twitter pictures of it flying at one point off the coast of the U.S. Down south somewhere. The existence of the balloons is not a mystery to people in that field. What we've never seen, what is unprecedented, and whoever the source was at the Department of Defense would have to acknowledge this, what is unprecedented is a balloon flight that entered over Idaho and flew over Montana, over all these sensitive military installations, Air Force bases, ICBM fields, right across the middle of the country. That has never happened before. That is unprecedented. That it flew briefly over some part of the U.S. or continental U.S., that's one thing. But what we saw this week, it's unprecedented. And that's why everyone's reacting the way they're reacting. We've never seen this. So this is no comparison to anything that may have happened up to this point.
Your colleague and friend, Republican Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, accused President Biden of, quote, dereliction of duty.
On there, Jake Tapper goes on to ask Marco Rubio about whether, like, Biden was wrong to wait till it was over water to shoot it down. And like I said, down in the video description, if you click on sources or the links under sources, there's one for CNN State of the Union. You can watch the whole program and see the rest of that interview. But that was all Jake Tapper did to cross-examine Marco Rubio on the balloons that were the minor incursions that I was talking about earlier during the Trump administration, although now it seems like we're learning that it was only during the Biden administration that we even found out that there had been Chinese spy balloons over the U.S. during the Trump administration. Like, that's why no one in the Trump administration is admitting they knew, because they didn't know then. It was like some sort of like backwards looking forensic analysis that found out that there were these previous Chinese spy balloons. But isn't that even worse, that like the Trump administration didn't even know the Chinese were sending these spy balloons over Texas or Florida or Hawaii or Guam, or there was like some reports, but anyway, Trump let them get away with the minor incursions. That's why this new, like even more aggressive Chinese spy balloon was like briefly over the Aleutians before the military could shoot it down, then over Canada and Idaho and Missouri and Kansas and South Carolina, but then they had to wait till it was over the water, so they weren't going to kill anyone when they shot it down. And along the way, they jammed it, apparently, according to the Defense Department. And anyway, that Jake Tapper didn't bring any of those facts up, so it wasn't that great a cross-examination anyway. And Jonathan Karl took a different strategy. This is the final newsmaker clip I'm going to show you. I don't know, is this like a fair tactic where right at the end you say, yeah, oh, by the way, what you said was totally bullshit. Thank you for being here. And all Marco Rubio can say is, thank you. That's kind of what happens in the final newsmaker clip I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over.
Always get it back in a neat package.
Did Secretary Blinken make the right move to cancel that trip to Beijing?
Yeah, I don't know how you could possibly make that trip happen at this point with this thing happening. But I think these two things were linked. And I think most troubling, and maybe it's not true, I hope it's not true, but there are reports in Bloomberg and other outlets that one of the reasons why the Biden administration did not disclose this balloon earlier to the American public, because it didn't want to endanger or imperil his ability to travel over there. But certainly, I think once this happened, I think there's no way he could have possibly made that trip at this stage.
And he shot it down when he shot it down based on the advice of the military. You don't think he should have ordered it to be shot down earlier against the advice of the Joint Chiefs, do you?
Well, I think it first begins by understanding when did we first track it over airspace. Theoretically, if it entered to Alaska, NORAD, it's our system of spotting things and protecting both American and Canadian airspace, should have spotted it a lot earlier. So I'd love to hear from military officials about why wasn't it addressed earlier? What were the options at that point? Again, look, maybe in a closed session or maybe in the settings of with the benefit of hindsight, they'll have some real good arguments about why it couldn't be done. I recognize that you shoot something out of the sky that's the size of 3 buses and it lands in the wrong place, it could hurt, harm, kill people or damage infrastructure. But by the same token, I think that if that was the case, then I think it really would have been helpful for the President of the United States to get on national television and explain to the American people, this is what we're dealing with, this is what I'm going to do about it, and this is why I haven't done it yet. None of that happened, and I don't know why. And in fact, I don't know why they waited so long to tell people about this. And if they knew the trajectory that it was on, it seems, from late last week.
All right, and we're also told, by the way, that this happened 3 times under the previous president. Obviously, there were no public notifications there. Senator Rubio, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, let's bring in Admiral.
So what do you think? Is that little ending there where Jonathan Karl used the fact check as a goodbye, and all Marco Rubio could say was thank you? Is that the most effective cross-examination, not letting him give his whole thing about how, oh, well, that was just a minor incursion, and I talked about the whole minor incursion thing, and I don't know. You can let me know what you think about all those clips. I hope you appreciate the time and effort I put in. Oh, I see Matthew gave me a super chat contribution here at the end, so I guess I do have some financial appreciation, and I hope the rest of you can give me your positive comments, your thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and make sure you get all notifications if you go click on the little bell, and that way you'll see all my videos. Those are all ways you can support my live stream. And I think I'm also going to make a Fox News bias video, Fox News bias won't call a balloon, or that's probably not going to be the title, but something like that out of the first few clips from this video. I'll edit that down and upload it sometime tomorrow, as that might be my new practice of trying to come up with a smaller edited excerpt from the live stream for people who don't have time to watch an hour plus video. We're just a little over an hour now, but anyway, if you appreciated the time and effort I put into making this live stream, that's 8 or 10 hours worth of work, you can give me the thumbs up, subscribe to the video, positive comments are right under the video. There are ways to become a monthly patron on Patreon, or a one-time donation through PayPal at the, where am I? I'm missing my ACLU Constitution here somewhere. Oh, is this in it? No, that's not it. But at the $5 contribution level, either monthly or one time, I will send you an ACLU Constitution, a hashtag LiberalViewer weatherproof vinyl sticker if you give me a shipping address to send it to. I'm going to keep doing this live stream all the way through the 2024 presidential election. And if you like what I'm doing, I hope you will support it in whatever way you can. And until next Monday, or like I said, I think sometime tomorrow evening, I will set a premiere for an edited, produced video about how Fox News bias wouldn't say the word, or about the Fox News bias I showed earlier, where they wouldn't say the word balloon, something about that. But until then, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.